Welcome back to FiddleUP. I'm Emerald Ray, and today we're going to be talking about putting sets together. Now, this is not something that's necessarily counterintuitive. Some people find this easy, just very natural, and some people struggle with what's the rule of thumb for this? So I'm going to give you a few different considerations that you would go through to put a set together, because sometimes you can have sets that are just, some nice easy jigs. And then sometimes you can have long sets of all different types of tunes and all different kinds of keys. And so I'll talk about how that happens and why and all those kinds of things. So let's talk about genre for a start. So, it's easy enough to say, these are some Irish tunes. We can put them together, and here's some old time tunes, and here are some Scottish tunes. But sometimes you might want to mix them together, and you can absolutely do that. You just have to make sure that they go together nicely. And, it's kind of easy to, put things in a big macro group like that. Some people don't like to put Irish tunes with Scottish tunes and Scottish tunes with Irish tunes. It's totally up to you. There's enough crossover between the two. There's enough core repertoire between the two things that makes sense. If you want to go into an old time tune and something's feeling awkward, you might just want to have the right transition. But I just wanted to say, first off, you can absolutely mix your styles, and you can absolutely put a set together that has multiple genres in it. So you don't have to stay in your little boxes. And so you just want to take some of the next few things into account when you're doing that. So the next thing you want to take into account is tune type. And tune types have to do with the key signatures. So reels and, old time breakdowns and stuff like that are generally in 4/4. And so those actually go together nicely. You can mix them because, they're in the same time signature. Things like going from a jig to a reel can be a little bit more awkward, but they can also work beautifully. So if you're talking about tunes of the same tune type, like if you have a bunch of reels, then that's easy. It's a bunch of reels. You don't have to think about it too much. But if you are going to be mixing tune types, the one rule of thumb is that you want to start slower and go faster. And again, you don't have to do this. I'm sure you've heard people messing with that. And, especially when it comes to Cape Breton strathspeys too, this breaks the rule, because Cape Breton strathspeys are very, very, very fast, and then they go into a reel, which is technically slower. So obviously there are some exceptions to this rule, but when you're putting your sets together, you just want to think about, okay, maybe I'll starting from a march and going into a slower strathspey and then a faster strathspey and then a reel. That's why the tunes are kind of set like that. So when you're putting tunes together and you have a waltz and a jig, for example, you probably want to play the waltz first and then go into the jig afterwards. Just considering the type, and there's lots of different formats of how tunes are lined up, and I'm sure you've heard some of those, and so you can just copy some other formats before you kind of get into creating your own kind of modern versions of things, which is great. You also don't have to wait. You could go ahead and do some modern stuff right away if you want. But that's just that's really the only rule of thumb, is going from slower to faster in general. Again, there's exceptions. The other thing to take into consideration is the key. And I feel like this is the thing that people get the most hung up on. It's like, what key do we go from where? And so it depends on how much of a traditionalist you are. When it comes to keys, I'm a bit of a traditionalist in that all of Celtic music and old time music and all that stuff used to just be, we play in the same key for a very long amount of time before we start switching keys. And the whole switching keys thing is a bit of a 20th century thing. So if you see Irish music, for example, and if you see Scottish country dance, and they're doing these long dance sets or performance pieces, and each tune is in a different key, that's new. That's so, if you went to an Irish session, their heads would explode if you played all the tunes in the same key. Like, that's how it was 50 years ago. So it's like, or maybe a bit further back, like, you know what I mean? It's like playing all in the same key is actually the traditional thing. So never be afraid of doing that. I do it all the time, even though people go, well, people act shocked sometimes. And yeah. People used to play, long rakes of tunes all in the same key. And that's because they were playing with pipes, and pipes are in one key. Pipes are in D or they're in A. A in Scottish music usually, although there's some exceptions there, but usually it's A pipes in Scottish music and D pipes. That's why you have so many A tunes in Scottish music and so many D tunes in Irish music. So, but yeah, people used to just play like D all night or A all night. And that was pretty normal. But now we have all this key jumping. And so the keys that people pick, especially in Irish music and Scottish country dance music, and in country dance music as well, they do this. And so they tend to pick what are called related keys in music theory. So if you know a little bit of your circle of fifths, that'll help. And the circle of fifths is you just jump up 5 notes. Like if you're in the key of G and you want to go to the next tune, D would be a good option. If you're in D, A would be a good option, or you can go the other way around. You can go back down. You can go a 4th as well. So you could go from D to G, so those tend to be very, key-wise, tend to be very easy transitions. But you can also go to the related minors, which tend to be the 3rd or the 6th. So if you're in A minor, going to the key of C would work, that kind of thing. So that requires a little bit more basic music theory than we can go through in this video. But honestly, there aren't that many of them. We don't play in all the keys in Celtic music in old time. We really only stick with the easy keys, basically, so it's not that difficult. And by the time you got up to the harder keys, flat keys and stuff like that, you would know enough about what's going on for this to be an easy conversation to have with yourself. So just taking keys into account, again, you can always stay in the same key as far as I'm concerned. But if you want to switch keys, just, hop over a string. That's the easiest way to get started with that. And more important than that, I think, is actually the transition from tune to tune. So you can change from any key to any key, in my opinion, as long as you do a proper transition. And so that requires maybe improvising the end of the tune into the next tune. So I think, especially for performance stuff, like as long as you have a good way to get from A to B, you can go anywhere. And Scottish musicians are a little bit more into this. Scottish sessions tend to do crazy things, like, because we play in all the flat keys. So, sometimes you'll be in a session in Scotland and the whole session will just decide that we're just going to go up a half step every single tune. So that's a little nuts. And kind of a little bit contrived, but it's really fun as an exercise to be able to go, okay, we're in A, that means I need to go to B flat next, and you have to like trick yourself into thinking of the next B flat tune while you're listening to the key of A. It's a great ear training exercise, and Scottish musicians are so good about stuff like that. So, everything's a game and a competition in Scottish music. It's really fun. So, in terms of changing the key, yeah, you can really go anywhere. You don't have to use the standard, standard rules if you can kind of come up with an interesting way to connect the tunes. So, that's kind of the creative side, but also on the sort of not, just the kind of practical side. If you're picking tunes, you want to make sure that if a tune starts, if you want to go into a tune that starts at the way bottom of your fiddle, you want to think about not putting a tune before it that ends at the top. It's just, you just kind of want to think about, where does this tune end? So as you get better at improvising your sets and playing in sessions and breaking up your sets a little bit and being a little bit more improvisatory with that, you will start to not only be able to hear the next tune as you're playing the end of that tune, but sort of have a feel for where this tune is going to end and how we're going to get to the next thing. And so, the more you work on your pickups and your transitions, and these are things that you can plan ahead of time as well. You don't have to improvise them, but the more you start thinking about your tunes in that way, the more you'll start getting into the mindset of things being just a little freer on the ends, and then you can get into your tunes, and then you'll get to a point where you can put any tune after any tune and find a way to make it work. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's some good rules of thumb for putting your sets together. I hope we can play some sets together sometime, and I will see you next time.